There we go. There we go. Hello and good evening and welcome to the Arundel Camera Club meeting for Thursday, March 16th. My name is John Milliker and I'm the club president for the 2022-2023 season. The Arundel Camera Club was founded in 1957 and exists to promote the arts, science, and education in all aspects and fields of photography. For more information about us, please visit arundelcameraclub.org. We are so happy that we're now meeting in person and online again. If you are local to Anne Arundel County, Maryland area, we encourage you to visit us at the Severna Park Baptist Church located at 506 Benfield Road, Severna Park, Maryland. Before we move to tonight's program, do we have any announcements from our officers?
I'll send an MPA update out in the email.
Okay, Ron will send an MPA update. I will give everybody an update on Woods Church. We received so many great entries on Woods Church, and I'm very proud that so many people sent stuff in. The only problem with that is that's usually going to be less that we can submit, but the thing is we're going to get everybody in the Woods Church exhibition there. I am going to send out an email next week and figure out how many people we've got and how many people, how many photos each person could submit, and see if we can squeeze a couple more in at Woods Church, but look for information out there. The deadline is tonight at midnight. And I'm not gonna check my email at midnight. I'll check my email at like 10 a.m. tomorrow. So you've got until about 10 a.m. tomorrow if you haven't submitted anything for Woods Church. And remember, that's for our paid members only. I sent out an email also about June 3rd. Downs Park is having a family day. And they're allowing vendors to come in, and if you are not selling anything, you can get a table for $50, and then you get that $50 refunded to you. We would do it, but we have an event out of town. Kind of looking if anybody out there would like to volunteer, maybe set up a table and talk to people at the Downs Park Family Day about our wonderful club. Please email me and let me know. Sue, would you like to come up and talk about movement on the banquet, which is very exciting? Then I'll have you pass the microphone over to Christine when you're done. Come on up.
Hi. The date for the annual banquet in person is the 25th of May. We have a contract at Olive Grove, located on North Hammonds Ferry Road. We have the banquet room from 6:30 to 9 p.m. It's buffet style this year. Bob and I have been to see the rooms that we have a choice of, and there is plenty of room to move around with our size crowd and access the buffet tables without bumping into each other. There will be 3 entrees on offer: beef tips, salmon, and manicotti. The restaurant also includes rice, salad, green beans, tea, coffee, soft drinks, and assorted sweets. We'll be sending an email out within the next few days. The RSVP deadline will be approximately April the 22nd, and the ticket price will be determined somewhere in the low $30 per person. The restaurant requires a 25-person minimum, so please plan to bring your spouse, your friend, your significant other to make sure we meet the 25-person minimum. But look for an email this week with those details and the ticket price and where to send your check for the banquet cost.
Good evening. First, I'm going to start with our upcoming schedule. On March 23rd is our next print contest for color and monochrome. Our theme is open. On March 30th, we're having a studio night. Please, I need help. Can people help me find some models? And/or if you have a lighting set up, please message me and let me know you're going to bring in some lights. I have a couple models in the works, but the more if we have a few people, the more we'll have for people to photograph. And that'll be an in-person night. Streaming, that's not going to be very good for the people online. But if you're coming, bring your camera and you'll be able to get some good shots of people in different studio setups. On April 6th is a program by Burke Seam from Service Photo. On April 13th is our digital contest for a Looks Like a Painting theme. On April 15th is our field trip to the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore. And then on April 20th is the Annapolis Photo Walk. So please join us that night, not here, but in Annapolis for a walk. Tonight, we have a presentation by Mark Battista, who is a painter and fine arts photographer specializing in portrait and still life photography. He graduated from Payer College with a BFA after working for several years as a fine artist and illustrator. Welcome, Mark.
Welcome. Good to be here. What I'd like to do is jump right into the program if possible, and I will save time later on for the presentation. If anybody has questions, be more than happy to answer them. Let me try to share the screen. Keep my fingers crossed that this works. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Could you see the screen? It's a gray background with some images.
Let them know.
Yes, it looks good. Sorry.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, well, welcome to Intro to Composition. Composition is basically the backbone of imagery. It's the foundation and the structure of an image. So we're really going to dive deep tonight into learning about composition. We're going to learn about the elements of art, creating a center of interest. We're also going to discuss balance versus visual weight versus typical rules that we normally find often when we're learning about photography. We're going to talk about different compositional arrangements to avoid, such as tangents, and we're going to give examples of working through a composition. So what is composition? Composition is the arrangement of the art elements to tell a story, to express a mood, and to communicate an idea. So it's how we're putting all these elements together that do this. If I said to you right now, to meet, nice hi you probably would have a very difficult time understanding what I'm trying to say. But if those words were rearranged and you saw or read, hi, nice to meet you, you would quickly be able to understand that. And composition in visual terms is a lot like that. If you use the art elements such as line, shape, value, and texture in a strong way, your message is more easily communicated. As Christine said, I started out as a painter. So these are some examples of some paintings that I've done. And many of the concepts that I'm going to share with you tonight is directly from my years of painting and studying as a fine artist. So we're going to apply those art elements to the art of photography tonight. The elements of art are the visual components, such as line, shape, color, value, form, texture, and space. So if you're out in the audience, you don't actually have to do this, but just imagine standing up and holding a camera to your eye as if you were going to take a shot. Now I'm going to ask you, when you were doing that, were you holding the camera horizontally or vertically? That's one of the major decisions that we have to make when starting to create an image. And often it's overlooked. So, which way did you hold the camera? Did you hold it with intent? Did you hold it vertically for a reason or horizontally for a special reason? These are examples of images that are basically done in black and white. And it's an image of a flower, an image of a sand dune, an image of some stairs. But really what these images are about are lines. The flower is about curved lines. The sand dunes are about repetition of lines. And the image on the right is all about vertical lines, expressing a sense of movement. So many times photographers will go beyond the actual subject and start being expressive with the way that they're using the art elements, such as line. Here's a famous photograph by Alfred Stieglitz of the Flatiron Building in Manhattan. And see how he framed the image. The image is in a tall vertical rectangle. Vertical lines usually express power, strength, stability, and grandeur. And at the time, it was a major building being constructed in New York City. And he wanted to express that feeling by having a vertical aspect to his image. This was an image that I created, and it's a visual composite. It's a composite photograph, and it's all about transformation and change and growth. And I intentionally framed this as a vertical. I think it wouldn't have been as strong if the image was in a horizontal format. Emphasis of verticals are also in architecture. Many bridges, churches, government buildings have an emphasis on the verticals. Think of the facade of a bank. Oftentimes they'll have very, very tall columns. And this gives sort of a feeling of strength and stability. And if you want to do some banking in that building, you definitely want to bank in a building that in a banking facility that has strength and stability. So visually, it's expressing that feeling. So again, your choices are vertical and horizontal. And I encourage you, when you're shooting some subjects, to try to shoot both ways. One thing that I'd like you to do tomorrow, if you have time, is to go over the last shoot that you did and count during that time how many vertical shots you took and how many horizontal shots you've taken. If you've tended to shoot in just one aspect, try to challenge yourself the next time you go out and shoot, and make sure that you try both ways, or shoot in a square. Here's an example where the camera angle becomes very, very expressive. This is a photograph by Sam Abel, and it's of a Norwegian fisherman, and it expresses a feeling of nobility and dignity. And the way that Sam Abel was able to do this was he got down very, very low, and he shot up at the fisherman. And that gives a feeling of dominance and superiority when you're looking up at someone. There's also the concept of figure-ground relationship, where we basically have dark shapes. The fisherman is a dark shape. The boat behind him is a dark shape. And it stands out because the background is lighter. So it's this idea of darks and lights, one shape standing out from the other. Very, very simplified composition, but a very strong and effective composition. Horizontal lines, they often express a feeling of calmness and tranquility. So this was an image I did at the New Haven Public Library, or New York Public Library, and it was of a figure kind of walking through, used a slow shutter speed, so you could sort of see these ghost-like impressions of feet. But the emphasis is basically on the horizontal lines of the steps. Here's another image, still life, that I created. And again, I really stretched out that format, the aspect ratio of the image, to give a sense of peacefulness to this image. It's often said that if you are shooting a landscape or another type of image, that for that fact, you should not split the image equally in two. And in this image, we have the horizon line basically splitting the image in half. When somebody does that, the viewer doesn't know what is the most important part of the picture. The viewer doesn't know where to look at. So when I'm looking at this image, my eye kind of bounces from the sky to the foreground, back and forth, and I'm not quite sure what the center of interest is. By either lowering the horizon, like in this image, you would emphasize the sky, or if you make the horizon higher, it emphasizes the foreground. It creates for a better composition. In this image, shot down, I was really, really low, kind of shot up, placed the horizon higher in the image, and allowed that little brook to create sort of a leading line to the canoe. I was shooting one day right after snowfall, and it was very, very foggy out. And at first, I wasn't quite sure what my subject matter was going to be. I was really interested in the trees. But after a while shooting, I found that the puddle was interesting and the reflection of the puddle. So I ended up getting very, very low to shoot this shot. So again, the horizon was higher in the picture, and it gave more emphasis to the puddle. In this image, this is an old trolley that was covered with a tarp, and titled it Shrouded Trolley. And I wanted to kind of create a ghost-like feel in this image. So I actually used a slow shutter speed and allowed a little bit of the wind to blow the fabric, so it would become a little bit blurry. The fabric was actually blue. It was like the blue tarps that you find at Home Depot. So in Photoshop, I desaturated the color to make the tarp look white. And again, this is an image that is all about lines. It's about the curved lines of the tarp versus the very straight geometric lines of the trolley and the windows. And the way that I was able to use a slower shutter speed was to take an ND filter, which is basically like a set of sunglasses that you put over your lens. And it allows less light to come in, so you need a longer shutter speed to take your exposure. This is another image that it is all about lines, the repetition of the pylons. And in this image, I actually broke one of the rules. Usually you don't want lines to exactly line up horizontally, but in this image, I intentionally lined up the horizon with the stains on the dock. So I encourage you as well to shoot high, shoot low, shoot from normal height, just to see what are the options. Now, diagonal lines, they emphasize a feeling of action, movement, and tension. So in this famous image by Joel Rosenthal, we have the Marines raising the flag on Iwo Jima. And the photographer was able to capture a sense of movement, anticipation of the next action, and the decisive moment. If you notice, the flag is on a diagonal. The Marines raising the flag are all slightly tilting. Their limbs are bent at angles, and it gives a very, very dynamic feel to this image. Now, I always use this image as an example. It's kind of funny. If somebody entered this in a camera club, it would probably not get a great score due to being slightly out of focus. It's a little bit grainy. You can't see the details in the eyes. But I think it's a masterpiece in the sense that the photographer captured, the precise moment where you feel that flag is just getting ready to be thrusted up. He captured an image that said so much about World War II. Here's an image by Fan Ho, and again, he's using line to help lead the eye to the center of interest. Has this vertical line and this strong diagonal leading to the figure of the woman. And it's an interesting composition. Normally, we don't have the center of focus near the corner, near the edge of the frame. But in this image, there's this great sense of simplicity and minimalistic feel to this image that it works beautifully. And really, we're talking about 4 tones. We're talking about black, dark gray, light gray, and white. We also have something called implied lines, and implied lines are imaginary lines which usually direct the viewer's eye. If you notice, this man looks like he's walking through the left-hand side of the frame, and he's walking through the image. It's usually suggested to give a person or an animal or a car space to keep moving. It feels good. If we have, like in the image on the right, the person kind of looking like he's walking out of the frame, it creates a little bit of tension. Now, again, is there a right composition, wrong composition? It all depends on intent. If we were just making a pleasing picture, I would say the image on the left works well. But if you were doing an illustration for the theme of divorce, maybe the image on the right would work better. The man looks like he's walking out of the picture. Composition often ties to your intention, to what you want to say. This was an image that I took of a woman praying in Ravenna, Italy. And I tried to use some of the examples that we talked about previously. One of the examples is leaving some space. So she's placed a little bit left of center to allow her gaze some room to travel in the image. And also the sense of that foreground relationship. We have basically a dark silhouette of a woman against a lighter background. And again, we have the example of 2 birds. If you were doing nature photography, the bird on the top, it seems to have room to move throughout the image. The image on the right, it looks like that bird is going to quickly bump right out of the frame. It gives a little bit more tension. Another type of lines are curved lines, and they express a feeling of gentle movement. They're not as dynamic as diagonal lines. They're a little bit more subtle. Often figures in sculpture, in painting, will have an S curve along the back, and we call that contrapposto. And the way to create that is to have the model rest on one leg. So all the weight is on one leg, and the hips are at an angle. And then to balance the body, the shoulders angle out at a different angle. So if you look at all types of Greek sculptures, Roman sculptures, they've used this approach to creating some beautiful curves. Edward Weston is one of my favorite still life photographers, and he shot nudes as well as still life images. And the still life images are very sensual when you look at them. They have these beautiful, beautiful curves, beautiful sense of three-dimensional form to them. And many of his still life images almost remind me of the figure. I look at this and I think of dancer's legs. And this image of the pepper reminds me of a torso that's kind of twisted and contorted. Just beautiful, beautiful use of curves. So I encourage you to go out and instead of trying to shoot a thing, an actual subject, maybe pick an art element and go out and shoot line. Okay, one day look for diagonal lines. Another day look for horizontal lines. On this day, I was just looking for curves. So I went right in my backyard and just played around with trying to find some interesting curves. And it's a different approach to making pictures. Instead of saying, today I am photographing, a horse, or today I am photographing, a car. Think in terms of abstract terms like line, color, shape. Here's another image that I created, and this is all about spirals. Again, all about curved shapes. I found this shell, and I lit it from the front, and it was interesting, but didn't do much for me. By taking my light, placing it behind the shell, and then I put an amber gel on it, it really brought out the curves a lot more. We also have something called leading lines, and leading lines are lines that take the viewer's eye through the image to the center of interest. So those yellow train tracks basically lead the viewer's eye to the train. Famous photograph by Ansel Adams of the Snake River uses leading lines so beautifully in this image. When we look at this image, normally our eye would start at the bottom right corner. Our eye then would wander up the river and then eventually rest onto the mountains. And he also used lights against darks, darks against lights so well. We basically have a light river against a dark foreground. And then we have dark mountains against a light sky. So it really, really makes the elements of his composition stand out. So an assignment, go spend a day shooting lines. Try to shoot compositions with vertical lines, diagonal lines, horizontal lines. Possibly look for leading lines that are going to lead your eye to the main subject. Move to position yourself to make the composition work. And think in abstract terms. Don't think about the subject. Example, flowers, buildings, trees. Think abstractly. Shape is another art element. So we have geometric shapes. We've learned these since kindergarten, our circles, squares, and triangles. And then we have more organic or free-form shapes that don't quite fall into the organic category. Here's a still life that I created, and really it's all about circles, the repetition of circles. So the butter churn is a circle, the orange is a circle, the knobs on the handle and the table are circles. Even the little purple details in the flowers are a repetition of the circle. So sometimes by repeating shapes again and again, it unifies your composition. In this still life, it's arranged in a way where there's an underlying structure. You might not see it. It might not be really evident until you start to analyze it. But basically, this design is based on three basic shapes. The oval of that center egg, the eggs themselves are based on a shallow triangle, and then the crock behind it is basically a square. Many times we could have the figures composed in sort of a triangular fashion. And this couple, I actually framed them with a rectangle doorway, but their position is more of a triangular type of arrangement. Here's a beautiful, beautiful image by Louis Hine. And he used the juxtaposition of the geometric shapes against the organic. This was a time when the Industrial Revolution was starting to take hold. And this image is a statement about man and machine. And if we look and analyze this composition, it's about the repetition of circles. You know, we have the large circle of the machine, and the figure himself actually looks like he's sort of bending in a circular format. So he almost becomes one with the machine. So it's a statement about the Industrial Revolution, I guess, at this time. Here's an image that I created. Again, it's a composite image. And I had to sort of challenge myself to kind of make the figure and the geometric shapes work together. So again, if we break this image down, it's basically an oval for the head, sort of an inverted triangle for the body, and a circle shape that sort of frames the image. I did this series based on the 7 deadly sins, and this was sloth. Robert Frank is an amazing American photographer who created many photographs that talked about America and society in the 1940s, 1950s. And it's interesting how he used the geometrics of the squares and rectangles to frame his subjects. And the idea or the concept ties in with the design. He made a statement with this image about people's kind of roles and how they're sort of confined by society. And he was able to kind of express this by having them framed by these square windows. Scale and proportion could be used as well. When objects are close to us, they're going to look bigger. When objects are farther away from us and they recede, they look smaller. So in this Henry Cartier-Bresson's image, he had the children get really, really close, and then some of the figures far, far, far behind them. And it gives this really surrealistic, unreal look to the image. I also love the way that these windows are just little white squares against a white background. I almost hear music when I look at this image. It almost sounds like a staccato type of tapping-like sound looking at this picture. Use of triangles are often used, especially with figures. In Leonardo's famous painting, The Last Supper, he has basically 4 sets of 3 of the apostles grouped in a triangular form, and the Christ figure in the center is basically in a triangular position. If you look at this image here, this is by Annie Leibovitz, a more contemporary photograph. Can you see any implied geometric shapes? Can anybody see any geometric shapes that kind of help structure the figures?
People are seeing 3 triangles.
Hey, great, you got it. So basically, we have those 3 groups of women structured around triangles. And Annie always said, if you have a limb and you want interest, bend the limb. Don't have it straight and be rigid. So if you're looking at all the models' arms, wrists, hands, knees, they're all slightly bent. It gives a more graceful approach to photographing the figure. Now, color is another art element that artists and photographers use. And we could break the color up into 3 different categories or 3 different characteristics. We have the hue. Hue is basically the color family or the color name. So a color could be red, it could be blue, it could be yellow. We have saturation. And saturation, sometimes we call it intensity or vibrance. So color could be very, very saturated, very bright, or it could be very gray and muted. And then we have value. And value refers to the darkness or lightness of a color. The hue on a light blue robin's egg is blue. But the value is different. It's light. compared to a midnight sky. A midnight sky, the hue might look bluish, but is very, very dark, so the value has changed. So we're going to talk a little bit about some basic color theory. And artists usually arrange colors in a color wheel. It's just a rainbow that's sort of twisted into a circular format. And the three primary colors with pigment are considered red, yellow, and blue. If we mix two of those primaries together, we get a second group of colors, and we call those the secondary colors. So if we mix blue and yellow together, we create green. If we mix yellow and red together, we create orange. And if we mix red and blue together, we make purple or violet. Here's an example of one of Picasso's famous paintings of the old guitar player, and it's in a monochromatic color scheme. So this is one of the formulas for color harmony, making colors work together. In a monochromatic color scheme, the artist basically has one dominant color, and the dominant color in this image is blue. So we see elements in this image that are blue, blue-gray, blue-green, bright blue, dull blue, light blue, dark blue. Even the guitar that's sort of yellowish is sort of a muted bluish kind of yellow tonality to it. So that blue unifies the whole image. Picasso also used color as emotion. This was a painting that was supposed to reflect a sense of sadness. And blue often expresses that. You know, we even say, I feel blue if you're feeling sad. I kind of use this approach, this monochromatic approach in this still life, where I'm basically using very, very cool bluish tones throughout the whole image. Another formula for color harmony is an analogous color scheme. And analogous means colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. In an analogous color scheme, we share one color, and the main color in this image is yellow. So I don't know if you remember, but when we mix our primary colors yellow and blue, we create green. So green actually naturally has yellow already in it. So we're taking green, yellow, green, green, and creating an image with that. Again, analogous colors, the colors tend to play well together. The only thing is, if you see too many analogous color images, they could be a little bit boring. But Vincent van Gogh, in his painting of the irises, it's not boring at all. He basically used blue, green, and violet. So the color that sort of unifies them all is the blue. There's blue and blue, there's a touch of blue and violet, and there's a touch of blue and yellow, or touch of blue and green. So again, we're taking, three colors that share that common color. In this image, yellow is the common color that blends everything together. Another type of color scheme, which is sometimes a little bit more exciting, is called a complementary color scheme. And those are colors that are across from each other on the color wheel. They're color opposites. So if we look on the color wheel here, we notice that blue and orange are opposites, red and green are opposites, and yellow and violet are opposites. In Steve McCurry's famous image of the Afghan girl, he used a complementary color scheme, basically predominantly red and green. And what I find interesting about this image is he muted one of the colors. He made one of the colors desaturated, very dull, and then the other color was continued to be intense, continued to have saturation. So that becomes more of the dominant color. So what Steve McCurry did was the green that he used is sort of a gray green. So it sits well in the background. And then the rusty reddish color of her cloak is left very, very intense. So it seems to push that image, part of the image forward. Just a beautiful, beautiful use of complementary colors. Steve McCurry also did this again using the complementary colors of violet and yellow. So most of the tones in the background are sort of these cool bluish purples. Even the highlights in the model's face have sort of a bluish tonality to it. And then you get this really intense yellow that draws your eye into the image. I was in Florence a few years ago, and I came across this woman, and I was thinking of Steve McCurry when I saw what she was wearing. I saw that beautiful red scarf, and she had a green blouse on, and I wanted to arrange her and put her in a background that was a little bit cooler, so the background wouldn't fight from the warm tones in her face and her hat. So I want to share with you the 7 Deadly Sin series that I had worked on a few years ago. And color was used very, very expressively to tie the images together in a series and to try to make each image distinct. It was a challenge. When you're working on a series, you want the images to work well together and seem to fit well together, but you don't want them to get so monotonous and so similar that one image doesn't stand out from another. So the image on the left is sloth. The image on the right is greed. And again, I kind of use these industrial kind of looking framing devices to sort of frame the figures within the image. This was done during COVID, so I had limited access to models, had limited access to backgrounds. So actually the backgrounds were things that I found around the house. I ended up using an old sewing machine and compositing parts of that sewing machine together to kind of make these frames that confine the figure within the image. The image on the left is wrath. Image on the right is pride. Lust is on the left and greed is on the right. And then we have envy. So when you look at them all together, hopefully the colors sort of make each one distinct. Now, the other characteristic of color is value. And value, again, is the lightness or darkness of a color. Or if we're working in black and white, it's black, white, and all of the shades of green in between. Value is one of the art elements that defines how dark or light a color is. So when we're looking at this chart over here, if we look at the blues, we see a light blue, we see a medium blue, we see a dark blue. The hue is the same, the color is the same, they are all blue. The thing that is different is their value. White is added to some of the blues over here to make them lighter. Black is added to the blues over here to make them darker. But they're still blue. It's just the value has changed. Edward Weston, again, used black and white photography so beautifully. And he used dramatic light to reveal the beauty of everyday forms. The light was very directional. So instead of the light coming directly from the camera, he would place the light either from the side, slightly in front, or slightly behind the subject to bring out the three-dimensionality of the forms. Again, you could see his figure work has a very similar quality to his still life work. These beautiful curves, beautifully composed. Here's an image by Robert Mapplethorpe. Again, playing around with value, lights against darks, darks against lights. I did this portrait or hand portrait of my father. He was a Marine, and I wanted to use dark values to communicate the feeling of sort of a solemn kind of quality to the image. It has a very, very different feel from the flower image here, where I wanted a very light, happy feeling, where most of the values are kept very, very light, very, very high key. So values could be expressive as well. Now, form is another art element, and form, you're going to need light and dark, but it refers to the three-dimensional quality of an object. So instead of a two-dimensional shape, we have a three-dimensional form, such as a cube, cone, sphere, cylinder. But to show that, the light needs to be directional. It needs to come from the side or above or from behind. It can't be flat light. This was an image of a man I photographed in Pesaro, Italy. And when I met him, I just fell in love with the face. I love the wrinkles and the evidence of age and the probably some of the trials and tribulations that he's gone through his life, and wanted to express that in my image. Well, when I first met him, he was sort of in the shadows, and everything was very, very flat. I wanted to really play up those wrinkles and lifelines in his face. So as I was talking to him, I would slightly move my body kind of at an angle, and he would move his body. And then I would kind of angle myself again, take a little step, and he would do the same thing. It's almost like when you're boxing. If you step to the side, your opponent's going to step to the side to counter. So eventually I got him into a position where the light was coming from up above and from the side. And that allowed all of those wrinkles and the form of his nose to really show up. And at that point, that was when I took my camera out and asked if I could take some photos of him. And luckily he agreed. Again, with this image, it's directional light. This has light coming from the side that makes the flower and the vase look very three-dimensional. So we're going to talk about the concept of creating a center of interest. And the center of interest is the area of an image which attracts the viewer's eye. It's basically telling the viewer, this is what I want you to look at. This is the most important part of my image. This is one of my favorite portraits by Rembrandt. And it's a self-portrait. It's a portrait that he did of himself. And there's so much to learn by studying this image. He created a center of interest. And if you look at the bottom of the image, there's basically no detail. There's no hard edges. Everything is kind of blurry, and the darks are kind of just blended together. So your eye quickly goes from that area to the middle of his body. Here, some of the edges become a little bit more defined, and still there's little detail, but a little bit more color. So your eye is attracted to this area. Finally, your eye rests in the area of his face, and the reason we're looking mostly at his face is that it has the strongest amount of detail. It has the strongest value contrast. That means I see the lightest lights over here where his hat is, and some of the darkest darks around his face. And some of the edges are very sharp. The edges around his shoulders, around the side of his face, around his nose become very, very sharp. So these are different ways of sort of controlling where your eye goes. So basically the viewer's eye is going to flow through the bottom of the painting. Not too much interesting things happening here. It's going to move through the upper part of his body and then finally rest on his face. So you really are confronted by this artist who was older at the time. I know he lost his wife, he lost his son. He was very, very affluent at one time, lost much of his funds, many of his patrons at that time. So it was an image where we really, really confront this artist as a man, trying to get through and survive. The other concept is called creating a hierarchy of interest. So again, what's most important? What strongly attracts the viewer's attention? And then what's secondary? What are the supporting elements? And then finally, what's least important? What elements don't distract from the leading actor? Sometimes creating a hierarchy of interest is like actors on a stage. We have the star of the stage, and then we have the co-star shouldn't overplay his role to overact the leading actor. And then we have the rest of the cast, and they're supporting the action that's going on the stage, but they shouldn't distract from the leading actor. So it's a photographer's responsibility to direct the viewer's eye to a part of the composition that's important to help tell a story or communicate an idea. It's asking yourself, what's important in your image? Here's a portrait by Yusuf Karsh, and I'm sure he studied Rembrandt because he's using many of the same techniques to create this image. If we look at the lower part of Winston Churchill's body, everything is very, very dark. The edges are very soft and blurry. There's not much detail happening. Then as Churchill's body is starting to get higher in the image, around his shoulders, around his arm, the edges start to get much, much more sharper. And the area that has most detail and is most contrasty is his face. So again, our eye goes right from the bottom all the way up to Churchill's face. An interesting story about when Karsh took this photo. He didn't have a lot of time, and I guess Churchill wasn't the most friendliest guy to photograph. and Churchill had a cigar in his mouth. And I guess Karsh went right up to him, grabbed the cigar out of Churchill's mouth, and Churchill just gave him this look. And it was at that moment that Karsh took this image. But he captured, I guess, a great leader through doing that. So one way to create a center of interest is through contrast. And contrast basically means differences. We see two boxes here. One box has a very, very dark rectangle and a very light square. And the other box has sort of a lightish gray square and a slightly darker gray rectangle. If you look at both rectangles and I ask you which rectangle attracts your eye more, which one does your eye go to? Hopefully you'll say the one on the left, the one with the very, very high contrast, strong differences. If you're having trouble seeing that, close your eyes, then open them up slightly, actually just squint your eyes and see which image pops out. And hopefully it should be the one on the left. In this image of a flower, what I did, I converted it to black and white for you to just see the values a little bit better, the lights and the darks. And hopefully you'll notice that the upper part of the flower is the lightest part against this darker background. So that's the area of most contrast. So that's the area that I want your eye to focus on. I intentionally darkened the bottom of the flower. The stem was actually very, very light, but I took a black piece of foam core board and I blocked the light from hitting the lower part of the flower to allow just the top of the flower to be the star, to be that center of interest. Here's another still life that I created. And again, I'm asking, where's your eye attracted to? Hopefully it's the white flowers that your eye is attracted to against that darker background. What I used some flashlight or speed lights in a softbox, and I intentionally feathered the light. So I shifted the light so it wasn't hitting the flower directly. The light sort of came in front of the flower, and that was to keep the background very, very dark. If I directed the light directly onto the flower, it would have also hit that background, and that background would have turned a light gray, and I wouldn't have gotten the same effect. Here's an image where, again, we're using contrast in a very, very simple way. This is all basically about a dark shape against a light background. So that little scent bottle is that little dark shape, and everything else in the image is relatively lighter values. So one way to compose is to create some strong tonal contrasts. It could create a powerful dramatic image. I did an image of my dad over on the left, and use the contrast and directional lighting to create that three-dimensionality. Took some of the items from his days in the Marines and did a still life, and again shot from above to have some directional lighting. And the saxophone also was done with a light painting technique. And again, the lighter parts of the image should stand out against the darker part of the image. The girl in the middle, the opposite is happening. Basically, it's the darker shapes that are standing out against the lighter background. So her hair and her eyes are emphasized against the lighter background. Here's an image where I'm taking basically all light shapes and then using the dark shapes to kind of direct your eye. So like Ansel Adams, you had that light white river flowing through his image. Well, I'm taking a darker kind of road and leading your eye towards the rock. So using contrasting values, you're going to be able to create a focal point. So in a dark image, your eye is going to usually be attracted to the lighter parts of your image. So the image on the left, our eye is looking more at the arms and shoulders and back of the model. The image in the center, your eye is going to go towards that piece of garlic, the clove of garlic. And in the woman on the right, the lightest part of the image is her face and her hair. So your eye is going to go to that area. Here's a beautiful image, again, done by Karsh, of Pablo Picasso. And he has these areas of high contrast and areas of high detail and sharp edges, contrasting with parts of the image that are totally in shadow, become completely black. So some people would say, oh, well, that's not great lighting because we can't see any detail in the forms. My opinion is, why do we need to see detail over on the left-hand side of his face when we know that the focus is Picasso's right eye? And being an artist, that eye is all-seeing. Compositionally, it makes sense with the idea of photographing that painter. I think sometimes having things thrown in shadow could make an image more interesting instead of every single thing being spelled out. That way, you're selecting what you want the viewer to see and not see. This was an image that I was working on, and originally I didn't have the white envelope or the white postcard in the picture. So everything ended up being very, very dark, kind of like the image over on the left. And things just didn't work. As soon as I put that white envelope in the composition, it allowed the thread to show up. It allowed the scissors to show up. And also that interesting shadow was emphasized much, much more. With this image conceptually too, the envelope fit in with the idea much better. This was an image about attachment and detachment. Attachment was symbolized by the needle and thread. You sew something together, you attach it, put it together. The scissors represented detachment, cutting away. And the postcard was kind of a question of whether that postcard was a love letter, which would be like a form of attachment, or possibly a Dear John breakup letter, which would be a form of detachment. We can also create a center of interest by using color. So again, the viewer's eye is attracted to an area of an image that has the most intense color. So if you want a viewer's eye to go someplace, put the most intense color where you want the viewer's eye to go. In this image of the old sewing machine, I used the color red, a saturated, fully intense red, to become the center of interest. And then the secondary area of interest is the green thread. And the background, we end up using very, very muted, desaturated colors like grays, sepias, browns. So it doesn't take away from the bright red and bright green. Here's another still life where I'm basically using color contrast. So I'm using warm colors. We think of warm colors like yellows, orange, reds. And in this image, we're using rust colors, browns, oranges. And then the color accent is the cool color, that little touch of blue. You can also create a center of interest through selective focus. The viewer's eye naturally wants to land in an area of the picture that is sharp, that's well focused. So in this image, I shot it at f2.8, which is a very wide aperture. There's only maybe a depth of about 2 inches that's totally in focus. And anything else in front of that 2-inch area or behind that 2-inch area falls off into unfocused imagery. So basically, the viewer's eye is going to travel from the bottom of this image. It's very, very blurry. There's no detail. And then it finally rests in this area that has some focus. So that's another way to create a center of interest. In this image, I wanted the viewer to notice the model's eyes. So again, I shot with an aperture that allowed the back of her to fall off into focus, and the background was completely out of focus, so it wouldn't distract from her face. I want to share another concept with you. It's the concept of balance and visual weight to compose an image, okay? And we're going to talk about this rather than very, very strict rules that are sometimes confining. So if I had you stand up and place both feet firmly on the floor, you're going to feel stable. You're going to feel centered. As soon as I ask you to start leaning and stretching your arm out, you're going to feel unbalanced. You're going to feel like you're going to fall. And to help you not fall, you're going to counterbalance with your opposite foot. Your opposite foot's probably going to be raised to help you balance. This is something that we just do intuitively. I think through human history, to survive, we've had to develop a sense of balance. And looking at images visually, I think intuitively you could probably see if something feels balanced or doesn't feel right. So symmetry is where we have complete symmetry, we have complete balance, where basically the left-hand side and the right-hand side are a mirror image of one another. Okay, if we split the image down the middle, almost the same thing is happening on the right and left-hand side. We also have something called asymmetrical balance. It's where the image is balanced on both sides, but different on both sides. So in this little diagram on the right, we have this large circle balanced by 3 smaller circles. It's balanced, but different. Here's a still life where I had to almost use sort of a counterbalance to balance this image out. Without having this little plant over here, everything felt heavy on the left. And once I put this little plant in, this orchid stem, it helped balance the image out much better. And to me, when I look at it, I almost think of like a ballet dancer. When a ballet dancer is sort of leaning one way, but maybe her leg kicks out from the other side, there's created a sense of balance. So we have equilibrium, but opposing effects happening. So sometimes think of that way instead of the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is a strategy that helps new photographers avoid constantly placing the center of interest directly in the middle of the photo. When we're first starting out, we almost photograph as if we were shooting a rifle, and we kind of aim everything towards the center of the frame, and our center of interest is always in the middle. For certain images, it works. For certain images, it doesn't work, and it doesn't work all the time. So the rules of thirds are good to kind of get people used to trying to compose and create the center of interest off center. And the concept of that is breaking your image into thirds vertically and horizontally. And when those 2 lines touch each other, it's kind of a PowerPoint. So like in this area over here, this would be the area that we'd want to put our most important part of our image in. Rule of thirds is applied here in this image of the still life. The little milk picture is down in the lower third over on the left-hand side. Again, we have this broken up into thirds, and the skull is basically in one of the third quadrants. But again, the rule of thirds is a suggestion. It's not a rule. Matter of fact, everything that I say tonight, please don't think they are hard and fast rules. They're just suggestions, and they can be broken. And I encourage you to break them. If it works, it works. Don't feel confined. That somebody said, "Oh, you must do it this way." When you hear that, be a little leery. If your story is better told through a symmetrical composition, then by all means use it. In this image, I wanted to create a feeling of loneliness and isolation. And I felt that composing this in a symmetrical way, having this little part of this dock isolated and centered, kind of expressed that feeling of loneliness. I think if I placed the dock over towards the corner or near the edge of the image, it would be a little bit too dynamic. It wouldn't express the same feeling. And if anybody gives you grief about, composing symmetrically, tell them Leonardo did, and with this image it works. Now, why does it work? Well, if we look at it, the form or the arrangement of these art elements follows the content. It follows the idea or the concept. If we look at this image, we have all of these shapes sort of pointing and leading towards the central figure, okay? And conceptually, the idea at the time was, he was the important guy. Everything led to him. So everything in the composition sort of pointed towards the central figure. Another way to compose is think about simplification, trying to simplify your design. One way is to crop. So you're cropping out any distractions, getting in close, looking for repetitive patterns, eliminate distracting images, background distractions can help. So I often ask myself, what should I include or exclude in an image? I photographed this model, and originally I photographed her from far away, got a little closer, and found it was interesting. And I really love the color of that red stripe of her scarf and the red dot on her forehead. So then I ended up cropping in really, really, really tight to accent that. And I think her eyes stand out more by getting in close. And having, the background wasn't important. Didn't need the background for this image. So ask yourself what to include, what to exclude. What elements of the picture will you include to tell your story? What elements are distracting and need to be removed? Or what could be added to strengthen your image? Always look for options. Here's an image where I was working with a model, and beautiful model, took some shots, and as a photograph, this is a terrible photograph. The background is distracting. It's not the most pleasing light that was used on her, and the cropping is very, very awkward. So I like to think of a quote that Ansel Adams said, "There is nothing worse than a sharp image of a fuzzy concept." So going back to that image that I took, it's sharp. Things that need to be focused are in focus, but I really wasn't making good judgments, and my intention wasn't strong enough to create an image that expressed this model's beauty. So I needed to make some adjustments. So I ended up moving her into lighting that was shaded. So the light was not so harsh. I moved in much closer to focus on her and not focus as much on the background. I ended up changing my lens to f2.8. So she was in focus, but the background wasn't distracting. The background would get nice and blurry, and ended up using a 200 millimeter lens to compress the background. So sometimes just by getting in touch with what you want to express could help you make better choices. Want to talk a little bit about backgrounds. Be aware of your backgrounds. A great subject can be ruined by a poorly designed background. So the background should support but not detract from your image. And I find that many people just focus on the background. It's like, or the subject. Like if they're shooting a flower, they're concentrating on the flower, but not paying attention at all what's around it. If something is distracted, if you could move 2 or 3 feet to one side or the other to get that distraction out of the way. Don't have tunnel vision. Another concept is the rule of odds. They say that using odd number groupings in your image is usually a little bit more pleasing. So use the number 1, 3, 5, 7s. What I feel about this is odd groupings tend to work because odd groupings help kind of make the group into a unified shape. Like when we're looking at a group of 3, it almost becomes like a triangle, and we end up looking at the center one. Okay, again, we're looking at 3, and we're looking mostly at this image. Where if we're looking at 2 images, an image of 2 elements, our eye kind of goes back and forth, and we're not quite sure what the main subject is. But there are times, again, to break the rules. And this was a composite image that I wanted to talk about America's interaction with each other right now. It seems like no one's listening to each other. So I ended up using 2 because I wanted your eye to kind of go back as if these figures were had a dialogue or really didn't have a dialogue with each other. So this sort of breaks the rules of odds. And this image was composed, basically I shot an image of apples, then superimposed the design of a flag on them, and then eventually superimposed these mouths that looked like they were yelling at each other. I want to also talk to you a little bit about the concept of visual weight. Certain elements in a picture will have greater visual weight, which means it will attract the eye more. If we look at the 3 sentences, visual weight, which sentence seems to attract your eye more? Again, remember, we're looking at a light white background. So hopefully the image with the greatest contrast will attract your eye more. So the visual weight down here at the bottom with the black typeface against the white background should attract your eye. Strong contrast directs the viewer's eye. Again, look at the black rectangle and the light blue rectangle. If you squint your eyes or close your eyes, open them up slowly, your eye should go right towards that black rectangle. When I have my eyes squinted, I almost don't see the white rectangle anymore. It almost blends into the background because the values are so close together. So here we're playing around with visual balance and weight. So I'm balancing out that large rectangular window on the left with the smaller rectangular windows on the right. Here's one of my most favorite images by Arnold Newman. And he created a portrait of the pianist Igor Stravinsky, and it shuns the commonplace rule of thirds and uses really, really interesting creative cropping and simplicity to create an image that's well-designed, expressive, and very, very, very original. If we look, Igor Stravinsky is placed in the corner of the image. We very, very rarely see a composition where we place the subject matter into that corner. He is balanced, though, with the rest of the components. We see the top of the piano, and it's a very, very large, dark shape against a white background. Has a great deal of visual weight. However, there's not much detail in the top of the piano. It's basically a black, simple shape, a black silhouette. Balanced by Igor Stravinsky, that has more detail and has a sense of form, okay? Also, the eyes are usually attracted to people psychologically. So it also helps that we're looking at a person, our eye is attracted to this shape in the corner. Just beautifully, beautifully composed. Even the background, I love the proportions of the large light rectangle with the medium gray rectangle over on the left-hand side. We have the triangular shape and the angles happening as well. I want to show you his original shot. The original shot that he took used more of a rule of third approach. Basically, if we split this into thirds, Igor Stravinsky's face falls into that lower third area. To me, it's not as a successful image as the one that I just showed you. Here we see the crop marks where he decided this is where he is going to crop his image. And this is another exercise that I suggest that you do. Take some of the images that you've shot and play around with the cropping. Try to compose vertically, horizontally, in very, very, very long rectangles, and see if you could strengthen your composition. Now, it's always wonderful to be able to do that out in field, but through the exercise of trying it during post-production, it will help you develop your eye. It will help you start to see possibilities. And once you do go out in the field, you'll feel more comfortable trying some alternate ways of cropping. Again, this was the final image, and I think the way he cropped it just made the image so strong. John Singer Sargent was a painter, and he beautifully used balance in his work. We have an image of some little girls in an interior. We have something that looks like a vase on one side. We have this kind of red triangular shape that looks like some type of a piece of fabric. And what I'd like you to do is cover with your hand the girl over here on the left. If you cover the girl on the left, the image starts to feel heavy over on the right. Then what I'd like you to do is try to cover this little red triangle. If you cover the red triangle up, it really feels very, very heavy over the left-hand side. That little girl over on the left looks like she's ready to fall out of the picture. John Singer Sargent used the shapes, colors, and lines to create just a beautiful sense of balance. Ken Davies was a world-renowned still life painter, and I got to study with him at Pear College of Art. And he taught me a very, very simple lesson on composition that I still use today, and I'd like to share it with you. He had a notepad, And on the notepad, it was white piece of paper. He drew a black square. And he asked me, he said, Mark, where does your eye go? Where does your eye look? What's your eye attracted to? And obviously I said, well, my eye goes towards that black square. Okay, he said, good. He said, now I'm going to draw a larger square. And I'm already thinking in my head, well, he's making a bigger square. The bigger square is probably going to attract my eye more than the little square. But when he shaded that square in, he shaded it in very, very lightly. And he said, now, where does your eye go in this composition? I looked at it, and again, I said, well, my eye goes towards that small, dark black square. And he said, good. Now he said, explain why. And I had to think for a bit. And then finally I realized, well, that small black square has the area that has the most contrast. And that's what's attracting your eye, the area of most contrast. And he said, well, imagine that this is a painting. And I started putting in all kinds of detail in the background. And he just sort of made these scribbly shapes. But he kept the scribbles very, very light. He said, now where does your eye go? Again, I had to say my eye was still attracted to that darker black square. So everything in this composition was arranged where the strongest area of interest was maintained. And it's something that I use in my own work all the time. In this image, I want to ask you again, what do you see first? So what we're going to do, we're going to close our eyes and then open them up very, very slowly. And what part of the image seems to pop out at you?
What was the answer? The white picture. The white picture.
Picture. Oh, good, good. So it's that white shape that stands out against the darker backgrounds. Okay. If it was something, say, in the corner of the picture or something way in the background that I didn't want you to see, then I would definitely have a problem. I'd have to go back and somehow relight it. But yes, your eye is going to go to that white picture. The white picture is the center of interest. So that's a way, by closing your eyes and squinting and open your eyes slowly, it's a way to either analyze the picture that you're seeing to see where the center of interest is, the greatest area of contrast, or if you're shooting a scene yourself, you could do that out in the field and you can kind of judge, what's my eye attracted to. So think in terms of balance and visual weight. The rule of thirds could sometimes be formulaic, and your work could become stale if you become a slave to some of the rules. Don't be afraid to go beyond them and break them. And we're not mathematicians, we're more like poets. So through experience, you're going to go more by feel than rather by a formula. You're not going to take a little ruler and exactly calculate exactly where a third is and mathematically transpose that. It's not the best way to work. It's going to be more by feel, and you're going to develop that feel by doing. Here's a few things that I'd like to share with you. A few things that we usually try to avoid. The concept of closed corners, half shapes, fused edges to frames, fused edges to shapes, hidden edges, and a split apex. So we're going to go through and talk a little bit about what those are and what they mean. Closed corners. Closed corners is usually when we have a distracting element cutting off the corner. So when composing in camera and post, you must do border patrol. Eliminate any distractions along the border that you don't want the viewer to see. So when I was shooting this still life, I was shooting this in natural light. I was shooting it early in the morning. So I had these beautiful long shadows coming from the bottles. But unfortunately, I had the edge of a doorway casting a shadow in the corner over here. So I ended up having to reposition myself and the bottles to be able to get that black distraction out from the image. Half shapes are distracting as well. The way that I cropped the figure was right at the waist. You usually do not want to crop at the joints. So I hear that you're going to be doing some work with the model very, very soon. Try not to crop at an elbow, a wrist, at the waist. It's usually more pleasing if you crop maybe 3/4 of the way up the arm, like maybe up here, or a little bit higher on the chest, or allow some of the waist to show through. Fused edges are also distracting. If an edge appears like it's getting cut off by the frame, it just doesn't feel right. So over here, we see this box, and the edge of the box is sort of clipped right by the left-hand side of the image. This would have been a more successful image if I stepped over to the left a little bit, or I actually moved the whole subject over to the right and had a little bit of background space around the left-hand edge. So either leave more space around a shape, or if you want to really crop the image, crop it intentionally. They say make a hard crop. So if I was going to crop this, I would have ended up really cropping it much, much more. Fused edges, we sometimes call mergers, are usually when the edge of an object touches or meets the edge of another object. I was doing a still life project and was experimenting with many, many different ways of using lights, arranging the lights in different ways, using reflectors to reflect some of the light back into the image. And throughout the process, I ended up moving some of the still life elements. So eventually, the porcelain vase, the edge ended up fusing right over here with the edge of the crock that was behind it. This needed to be fixed. So what I needed to do is take the porcelain vase, move it over about an inch over to the left to allow a little bit of breathing room for this porcelain vase. Half edges can also be something that could be very, very, very distracting. If you look at the spoon, we could see the left-hand side of the spoon, but then we go to the other side of the lemon and we don't see the other side of the spoon. It usually feels a little bit more pleasing if that element could be extended throughout both the left and the right-hand side. So would have been better if I've taken that spoon and maybe moved it over a little bit, take the lemon and possibly moved it over so we could see a little bit of the back of the spoon. Excuse me. A split apex is when we have shapes that are lined up either vertically or horizontally with each other. So if we look at this, we look at the chimney, we look at the windows, and we look at the flagpole, and they're all completely, perfectly kind of lined up in a vertical. And that sometimes can be a little distracting. So an idea is to shift one of the shapes over so there's no complete overlap with that apex. So I would either move to the left or to the right to kind of fix that. So one of the two most important words to ask yourself while shooting and editing your work is what if? Ask yourself, what if I change my point of view? What if I underexpose or overexpose? What if I shift format? What if I edit the picture in black and white? What if I change my aperture and create a different depth of field or focal point? Or what if I modify the light? You know, again, when you're shooting those figures, try not to just have the light in one position and take a couple of clicks and then walk away. Hopefully you'll have time to try some side lighting, possibly try lighting more from behind, maybe raising the light or lowering the light, raising or lowering your position. So you're either shooting down on the figure or you're shooting up at the person. Constantly ask, what if I try this? What if I try that? And I want to leave you with a quote that says, success is not final, failure is not fatal, it's the courage to continue that counts. And Winston Churchill said that, and I think it applies quite well to photography. I do want to let you know that I am offering 2 ebooks for members tonight. The ebooks usually sell for $25 each, but for members, I'm offering them for $20 each. And one of the books is Composition Shooting with Intent. And again, it addresses using the art elements to create your images. Has a lot of the material that we talked about tonight, and also have another ebook on creating still life photography. And that deals all with lighting, with using composition and actually applying it towards still life imagery, and different ways for coming up with ideas. And the way that you could order it is to go to my email, which is m16battista@comcast.net. Let me know which book or books you're interested in. And then what I could do is send you an invoice through PayPal. And once that's been paid, I would send you the ebook through email as a PDF. The nice thing about the PDF forms is you could save them onto your computer or phone to read, and you could also refer to them while you're actually shooting. So it's a nice resource to have. If you don't use PayPal, I could always forward you my address, and you could always either send a check or cash or whatever is easier for you. But what I'd like to do now is stop sharing my screen and have some time to take some questions. Let's see if we're,
Whoops.
let me see. Oh,
There we go.
okay, let me see if I could get to you guys.
You're not going to see our video feed because you're going to see what we're seeing to share with the Facebook group. But
Okay.
does anyone have any questions?
I'm overwhelmed.
Don't have a
It's
question, just want to
it's
say
a lot of
it was
material.
so I don't have a question, just want to say it was a great, outstanding presentation. I really loved it.
Thank you so much, sir. It's kind of like going to a buffet. There was kind of a lot on the table. You have to kind of pick and choose. There's certain concepts that might resonate with you tonight. So you kind of take those and work with them. And then the other ones, another time you could revisit them. But it's basically like giving you a whole college course on composition, kind of, putting it into like a 2-hour presentation.
Anyone else? Comments, questions?
Excellent presentation. How do I choose which of the ebooks to get?
Excuse me, which?
I said, it's an excellent presentation. How do I
you.
choose which of the 2 ebooks to get?
It depends on what you're interested in. If you want to develop your compositional skills, the composition ebook is great. If you'd like to try to explore still life imagery or learn about composition and then apply it to still life imagery, the still life ebook is a great book as well. A lot of people sometimes buy both, and they both sort of complement each other.
I shared the link about your books on our Facebook group
thank you.
earlier
Thank
this week whenever I shared the information about your talk. So you can see a bunch of his information about the books on our website, on our Facebook page.
And if you want to see more of my work, you can feel free to visit my website. It's just markbattista.com. You check that out as well. I'm on Facebook. If anybody wants to, friend me, feel free. Just let me know that you are a photographer. I've sometimes recently been getting friend requests from people that obviously aren't photographers. So I try to be careful on, who I accept as friends. But if I know you're a photographer from one of the camera clubs, I'll definitely be able to accept you. And you can follow, me as I'm doing work. Sometimes I'll share some background information about images that I'm working on or editing.
I don't see any more questions here. Let me see if there's anything on Facebook. Kathleen Lay says, thank you. A wonderful presentation. I learned a lot.
You're welcome. Very welcome.
I believe that's everything. Here, John.
Excellent. Well, I think I'll go ahead and take over a little bit. Mark, that was a fantastic presentation. You touched on a lot of compositional elements that I don't think I've ever seen in a presentation. So I definitely highly recommend checking out Mark's books. I think we're definitely going to be grabbing one. Mark, what's the deadline for people to purchase those? Because this does stay on Facebook and it goes on YouTube. Is there a deadline for people to get the books at that price?
You know what? For your group, I'll give you like a couple of months to decide. Yeah, say maybe by the end of May would be great.
Great. That's very, very generous. I think we'll go ahead and close it down. I want to remind people that, let's see, print contest is next week, theme of open. March 30th is the studio night. Please, if you can help Christine out, maybe we can, if we don't have people, enough models, maybe we can open up to the church. Anybody who would like to get a headshot or a portrait, maybe we can get rope some people in here. And then we have a program on April 6th. I don't have my glasses, so I'm just going to say it's the gentleman from Service Photo, And then we've got Looks Like a Painting coming up pretty soon. If you haven't seen the Looks Like a Painting in the newsletter that Mike and our members gave some information on what they were thinking, be sure to check that out. That's really eye-opening. And with that, I will say good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, Mark.